into my computer and I Googled Hunter joke 911 call. And about the sixth one down there was that joke. And so I was telling the group at my workshop, I don't have anything for tomorrow. I don't have a joke yet. And so Alice, where's Alice? Alice said, well, just Google. What you told me to Google is not what I Googled. I Googled Catholic Church jokes. Don't Google Catholic Church jokes. It's not a friendly place. So I had to adjust my Google search. I think it was good church jokes, clean church jokes, I don't know. So this was the first one. I think it's pretty good. During a church conference, a number of priests from different orders are gathered in a church for Vespers. While they are praying, a fuse blows and all the lights go out. The Benedictines in the group continue praying from memory without missing a beat. The Jesuits begin to discuss among themselves whether the blown fuse means they are dispensed from the obligation to pray Vespers. The Franciscans compose a song of praise for God's gift of brother darkness. The Dominicans revisit their ongoing debate on light as a signification of the transmission of divine knowledge. The Carmelites fall into silence and slow, steady breathing. The parish priest in the group who is hosting the others goes to the basement and replaces the fuse. There you go. Does that earn me a few brownie points? I don't know if you can tell jokes about Jesuits anymore, can you? So we come to a new day. Most of us were here yesterday. Great day, I thought. I saw Ralph Martin off to the airport this morning, and he commented on the spirit that we have in this diocese, and felt very much at home with us. So he did not get a chance to see the cathedral, and I said, on your next visit, we'll take you there. So we'll hope to bring him back someday. Today we welcome, I've been on the lead person for Ministry Days for 13 years, and I've never seen a keynoter go through more to get here than Jim Beckman did yesterday. He and I first talked about 8:15 in the morning, and he told me that his flight had been canceled from Denver. Middle of the afternoon, he was still in Denver, and we talked again. But he thought he was going to get to Chicago and get into Rochester about 9 o'clock last night. As I was heading home last night about 10 o'clock, I got a call from Jim. He was in Chicago, still waiting for a flight out, and I have no idea when he got actually into Rochester last night. And I was very happy to see him arrive with Ben this morning. So I feel like we should give you a standing ovation right now just for... But he didn't want to miss a joke, if you don't show up. So I would ask Ben Frost from our staff to come and introduce Mr. Jim Beckman.
All right, good morning, everybody. It is so good to see you all. I was just mentioning to some of the staff what a blessing it is to have us all together, and to see the faith in our diocese. I'm very excited about this morning as we were planning this months ago. We came up and said, hey, maybe we should invite Jim Beckman to come, and I got very excited about that. He's a very prominent leader in youth ministry in our nation, and when this was all happening yesterday, talking with Todd, and there were storms, and his plane, I think he had 3 or 4 flights delayed. He didn't get in until midnight last night, and I was nervous thinking, is he going to be able to get here? And where there's a will, there's a way, and I thank you, Jim, for your perseverance, and maybe he'll share a little bit of that with you as well. But we're very blessed to have him, and I'm excited that you're all able to receive what he has to share for us today. So I want to just give you a little bit of background about Jim, and we'll welcome him up. Jim is a more than 20-year veteran of youth ministry and has served in various roles of leadership in youth ministry on a local, regional, and at national levels. Jim was the founder and executive director of Impact Center, a youth ministry mentoring and training organization that serves dioceses all over the country. Jim has developed catechetical and youth ministry training resources for years and has served as a trainer for many national organizations, including Franciscan University, Life Teen, and National Service Committee. Jim is a nationally known speaker and trainer. He serves on the editorial board and is a frequent contributor for Formed Magazine and has contributed articles to other publications, including St. Anthony Messenger Press, New Covenant Magazine, Our Sunday Visitor. And he's also the author and founder of Why Disciple, a series on teen discipleship and leadership formation resources. Jim and his wife, Meg, live in Highland Ranch, Colorado with their 5 children, Aaron, Claire, Daniel, Jonathan, and Brian. And again, we're very blessed to have him, and I invite you to join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Beckman.
Thank you. So I don't know, can I shut this one off? Can you hear me through the lav mic? I'll be using this one instead. So I don't know what the deal was over the last couple of days. I don't think I was supposed to be here. On Sunday, I was telling Ben this story this morning, but on Sunday afternoon, I was driving home and stopped at the neighborhood mailbox, which is just a few houses down from my house, and my 6-year-old wanted to run home. And I don't really like him to do that, so I was trying to say, Brian, let me just get the mail and I'll drive. And he was like, I want to run home. So finally I let him. And I'm making sure that he gets across the street and he's clear of cars. And then I turn my attention back to the mailbox. Well, at a certain point I'll reach up and open the garage door because I know that I've got to pull the car in. And so when I leave the mailbox and pull into the driveway, there's my wife on the floor of our garage holding my 6-year-old. And she's screaming at me, "You shut the garage door on his head!" And I'm like, what? So evidently I couldn't see because there was cars blocking my view, but the garage door had been opened a crack. My wife opened it because it was really hot and she was going in and out of the garage. I didn't know it was open. When he ran up to the house, he tried to go under the garage door. Well, when I reached up and open the door, I actually shut it on his head, because that was all that he got under there by the time I shut it. So I'm just convinced, we're going to be in the hospital. I mean, he looked, it looked bad. He has a big bruise all across the side of his face. So that ended up okay, and so we closed out the day, and so then I decided I can come. We don't have to be in the hospital with the 6-year-old. I can go to Winona. I mean, I got rebooked yesterday, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 times on different flights. And at a certain point, I cannot tell you how many times I was told yesterday, there's no way. You can't get there. There's no way to get you there. Delta Airlines, which is the place I originally booked my ticket, they gave up. They just said there's no flight that can get you from here to even to Minneapolis. At one point, I was considering flying to Chicago and driving the 4.5 hours. And I eventually had to just, I eventually just had to kind of take over the whole cause myself. I left the gate area, which everything was crowded there because so many flights had been canceled, went back up to the front side of the airport and just started going to one ticket counter after another until I finally found 2 flights on American Airlines that would get me here. And they said that they had seats on both of those flights. And then I had to stand there at the ticket counter and call Delta Airlines and have them transfer the ticket that I bought from them to American Airlines. Like, if I wouldn't have done that, I would not be here. There was a tornado, evidently, in Denver on Sunday night that shut down the airport for 3 hours. There was no flights in or out. There were thousands of people. Monday morning, they were trying to get out of there, and there weren't flights. So it was an exercise in what seemed like futility. And then only to fly over Chicago and for the captain to come on, he said, we're prepping to land. We started to descend. You could feel everything happening. And then he comes on and he says, folks, we're going to be going back up. They're going to put us in a holding pattern. There's a storm in Chicago, and they're not going to let us land. And I'm just looking around like, what is going on? Well, then when the same thing happened last night landing in Rochester, I was like, okay, that's it. I don't know what's going on. I can't even understand. So, but I made it here. Praise the Lord, huh? and it's great to be here with you. I want to start, which is going to seem a little odd, but are there any birthdays this week? Any birthdays here? Dad's 80th birthday. We have a birthday back here. Okay, let's stretch it. This week or next week? Oh, we picked up a couple more. Okay. Any anniversaries? You want to celebrate anniversaries? Mine's coming up in just a couple weeks. Priesthood anniversaries. So let's just sing. It's like, happy birthday, people. Okay? If you have a birthday this week or next week, why don't you stand up? We're going to sing happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to all of you. Happy birthday to you. And how about those anniversaries? If you have an anniversary, why don't you stand up so we can sing happy anniversary? I know this seems like an odd way to begin, but I actually do have a point with all this. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary to all of you. Happy anniversary to you. So very genuinely, happy birthday, happy anniversary to all of you. But it does serve a great point for me this morning, because as we look at the new evangelization, and I know Ralph Martin yesterday set some context for you, really helping you understand what is the new evangelization. I don't have to spend a lot of time setting the historical context, but I'm actually going to give you a couple of snapshots to show you how the new evangelization has evolved, going all the way back to Vatican II, and a number of kind of pinnacle moments in the church. I'm not sure if you've ever had this thought, or if anyone's ever said to you, it seems like the church sometimes focuses a lot of attention on dates, anniversaries. Like, why do we do that? Well, we just did it. I actually had somebody say to me once, like, why does the church always do this? Like, they're always releasing documents on certain dates, so they match up with past dates. It's like are they all like into suspicions? And I was like, no. Do you celebrate your birthday every year? Why do you mark the date of your birth? Well, because it's the day I was born. It's the exact same thing. The church many times will do things on significant dates, because it reminds us, it calls back the history of those significant dates. So the same reason why we have birthdays and anniversaries, parents do things like this. Anyone ever done this? Like you have your first locks of hair, and you have your baby memory book, right? You store all these things in there. How many of you still have the first lost tooth of some of your children? First steps, we take pictures of those first steps, or videotape, children when they make their first steps. I mean, parents, we're so weird, we go all the way. Like, we keep track of everything, and you're so excited. Now, I have 5 children, and we have memory books for our first 2 kids. And our other 3 children feel very unloved. Are there no memories of us? I actually said to my 12-year-old the other day, it's like, I don't think you even had your first poop. So, but we do these things, right? Like, this is human. We mark these moments and capture these memories because they're significant. Well, in some ways, the church does this too. The church marks history, it marks moments. And when we talk about the new evangelization, one of the important things that we have to understand is there's a historical backdrop to the new evangelization that's rooted all the way back in the Vatican II Council. This is where the beginnings of it started. What was the Vatican II Council all about? Renewal? What else? I think there's something even more important. It's about the church. But what wasn't Vatican II really called? Because the church needed to take time to consider, how do we communicate to modern man? In some ways, I think at that particular time, when the Vatican II was called by Pope John the 23rd, it was called because we were really beginning to see that man was drifting away from church. That in some ways the church had lost some traction in just the lived experience of her people. And how do we communicate effectively? It's not like the church is changing. It's not like the message has changed, but for whatever reason, and there's lots of them, right? Somehow that message was losing traction in people's lives. And that really was at the heart of why the Vatican II Council was called. How do we engage modern man with the truth of the gospel? That's what the new evangelization is all about. The new evangelization is about how do we more effectively communicate to people, to modern people today? How do we get the church to have traction in their life? So the birth of the new evangelization was really back in the Vatican II Council, 1962 to 1965. Well, the council was followed by a number of assemblies. We had general assemblies and extraordinary assemblies of the bishops, where the Pope would call back together all of the bishops to continue to look at some aspect of what they talked about at the Vatican II Council. Well, the third one of those assemblies, the focus was on evangelization. It's called by Pope Paul VI. And a year later, in 1975, the document Evangelii Nuntiandi, on evangelization in the modern world, came forth from Pope Paul VI. In 1977, a couple years later, the fourth assembly was held. The focus of this assembly was on catechesis. How do we teach the faith? 2 years later, Catechesi Tradendae was published. On catechesis in our time. So we have on evangelization in the modern world and on catechesis in our time. Do you see how these documents, this is the centrality of the mission of the church, is evangelization, bringing people to an awakening of faith, and then catechesis, teaching them the content of our faith. These two documents become pivotal documents in understanding what the new evangelization is all about. Okay, here's a sidebar trivia question for you. Who wrote Catechesi Tradendae? John Paul II? It came forth under John Paul II. So his name is the one that's kind of at the end of the document. It was actually written by 3 popes. The assembly was called by Paul VI. He began the document. John Paul I actually contributed to the document. But in his short lifespan, John Paul II came, finished the work, and was the one that actually it came forth under his name. So a little trivia for you. You can go home and share that with all your neighbors. They'll be so excited. Then in 1985, they had an extraordinary assembly where they called all of the bishops back together. And at that assembly, the bishops were saying, what we need is we need a new catechesis. We need a new catechism, a collection of all the teachings of the faith. John Paul II asked for the work to be begun on that, and in 1992 is when we had the Catechism of the Catholic Church. 5 years later, 1997, we have the new General Directory for Catechesis. Now, we had a general catechetical directory that actually existed before any of this stuff happened. Do you understand why we needed a new general directory? Because after you have Evangelii Nuntiandi and Catechesi Tradendae and a new catechism, you need a new document that's really going to help us understand how to use all of those tools. So, little snapshot of history, but let's look a little deeper at what's happening here. Sorry. Vatican II Council ended in 1965. Evangelii Nuntiandi was published in 1975, 10-year anniversary of the close of the council. Okay? We're celebrating birthdays and anniversaries here. The extraordinary assembly that was held in 1985, why is it an extraordinary assembly? All of the bishops come. At the General Assemblies, not every bishop comes. We had that experience this past year, right? When they had the synod back in October, not every bishop came. There were representatives from geographical areas all around the world. That's what the General Assemblies. An extraordinary assembly, everybody comes. Why do you think they had an extraordinary assembly in 1985? Because it was the 20-year anniversary of the close of the council. Okay? Then the Catechism of the Catholic Church comes out in 1992, which is the 30-year anniversary of the opening of the council. And it actually came forth in October, which was the beginning of the council. So these significant moments, so when you trace this snapshot of history, what we're really seeing is we see all of these kind of hinging around these significant dates, these moments in history, that it all ties back to the Vatican II Council. Okay? But look at this year, this past year, 2012. We're in the window right now of the 50-year anniversary of the Vatican II Council. So in 2012, just before, Pope Benedict XVI established a new pontifical council for the new evangelization. There's not that many pontifical councils. So to establish a council, a committee of bishops that specifically is going to focus energy and attention into understanding what is the new evangelization, what does it mean for the church, how do we practice it in the church. To have a council established like that is hugely significant. Then Pope Benedict set aside the year 2012 for what he called the Year of Faith. We're actually still in that, right? The Year of Faith ends on the Feast of Christ the King at the end of November this year, in the fall. So we're still in that experience of the Year of Faith, but it started at the time that the Synod started back in the fall, right at the beginning, the 50-year anniversary of the opening of the Vatican II Council. And then he called together the 13th Ordinary Assembly of the Bishops, and it launched in October on the same day that the Vatican II Council started 50 years ago. Happy birthday. Happy anniversary. Do you see the connections? So look at Pope Benedict in Porta Fide, which is a document that he used to set aside the Year of Faith. He says, in light of all this, I have decided to announce a Year of Faith. It will begin on 11 October 2012, the 50th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council, and will end on the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, Universal King, on 24 November 2013. So you can see the 50th anniversary of the opening of the Council, but it also is the 20th anniversary of the publication of the Catechism. So these dates have huge significance for us. You know, you may ask the question, okay, what's next? Okay, when you look at that whole snapshot of history, like, what do you think is going to happen next? Well, I can tell you this. Every time they have one of the assemblies of the bishops, a document comes forth. So just like that third assembly where they had on evangelization, then there was a document on evangelization from Paul VI. When they have the assembly on catechesis, Catechesi Tradendae. So, and that's part of what the assembly does. It's actually a working meeting where they're working on this document during the time that they're together. So one of the things that's next is we're going to have a document that's going to come forth now from Pope Francis on the new evangelization. Now, I'm only speculating, but when do you think that document will be published? I think it'll most likely come forth in 2015, on the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the close of the Vatican II Council. I could be wrong, and Pope Francis, you can't really figure the guy out. Everything he does is a little bit outside the box, isn't it? Which is just beautiful. But I think it's a good guess that we'll see that document come forth on the anniversary of the close of the council. And again, it marks this significant moment for us in history, giving definition to all of this. One of the other really significant documents that came forth during this time was Redemptoris Missio, on the mission of the Redeemer, that came forth from John Paul II in 1990, right? That would have been the 25-year anniversary of the close of the council. And that was part of John Paul II's releasing it at the time that he did. Why is Redemptoris Missio important? It's the first document where the term new evangelization is actually put forth in the document. That John Paul II starts talking about the new evangelization in that document, and it came out in 1990. Okay? So this is, I'm going to, this morning, I'm going to kind of break this up into three chunks. The first chunk I just did. I wanted to give you some historical backdrop to understand a little bit of the history of where did this all come from. You can clearly see that the new evangelization is firmly rooted in what happened in the Vatican II Council. What was the driving aim? Okay? Now, you'll hear terms sometimes used like the spirit of Vatican II. Anyone ever heard those words used before? Okay, whenever you hear those words, be very, very cautious. Okay? Because typically somebody that's talking about the spirit of Vatican II is actually talking about something that it wasn't really all about. The media and all kinds of, and if you ever want to read a great book, Ralph McInerney has a book called What Went Wrong with Vatican II. And it really was the interpretation of the spirit of Vatican II. So whenever you hear those words, I mean, we know very, very clearly what Vatican II was about. We don't need to talk about the spirit of the council. We can talk about what the aim of the council was. We can talk very definitively about what they were trying to do. They were trying to bring the church alive and re-engage modern man. And it wasn't that the church had changed. It wasn't that the church needed to catch up with modern times. It was that man had been pulled away from the church by modern culture, by modern belief systems and modern philosophies. And how do you engage all of those modern philosophies to continue to gain traction in modern man's life with what the truth of the church is all about? So yes, it means the church needs to change some of its practices. It might need to change some of its methods, right? Method of approach is everything, isn't it? I got a flight yesterday. There's a lot of people who didn't get a flight. Method of approach is everything, right? If you go up to the counter and you start yelling at somebody who really has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on, they're just working for an airline, and you start yelling at them and cussing at them and throwing your papers at them, which I saw all day yesterday, those people never got tickets. You know, because somebody behind the counter who you're yelling at is actually the one pushing buttons in a computer. And they can say, don't give them a seat. Don't give them a seat. You got to be nice to those people. You know, like they're going through hell. They're going through worse hell than us. They have to spend hours and hours dealing with people who have been bummed from flights or whatever, you know. Like method of approach, right? You got to approach those people with some sensitivity to their circumstances if you want them to help you. Right? This is what we're talking about with the new evangelization. What is the new evangelization? I'm sure you got a much more academic, theological, and better explanation from Ralph Martin. He is a doctor, by the way, and I'm not yet. Though I am a doctor in process. I'm a candidate, but not quite there yet. Here's my very, very simple explanation of the new evangelization. In the church, throughout the whole history of the church, we've really had two primary groups of people. One group is what the church calls the mission ad gentis. This is all the places in the world. You know, like when Jesus says to the apostles, go forth and make disciples of every nation, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. That's the mission ad gentis. Just going to every corner of the earth and bringing the good, saving news of the gospel, right? People who have never heard the gospel message before. Well, once you reach those people and share the truth with them, then emerges the second group. People who had heard the gospel message and had responded to it. Does that make sense? Like, throughout the history of the church, these are the kind of two situations that we dealt with. What is the new evangelization? The new evangelization is acknowledging that a third situation has emerged. We have a third group of people. A whole new group with a lost sense of faith. These people may even call themselves Christian. You know, in some of the studies that have been done in recent years, they say that the percentages are sometimes as high as 85%. 85% of people surveyed would claim to be Christian, but don't really have any tangible practice of faith in their life. Right? This is what the new evangelization is about. It's about this group of people who are not really living their faith anymore. And what makes the new evangelization so hard is because this group of people, many of them, have actually experienced something about faith or about church or about religion. Anyone ever done sales? Okay, have you tried to sell something to somebody that's already tried it and it didn't work? It's painful. Like, it's one thing to sell something that's new to people that they've never experienced before, but if somebody's had something, they've already bought it, they've already had the product and they use it and they felt like it didn't work, trying to get that person to buy it again is almost impossible. This is the new evangelization. What we're trying to do is we're trying to reach people who feel like they've already tried faith. They've already tried that church thing. Yeah, that didn't work for me. I don't know if any of you ever practice random evangelization. I do it all the time. And I challenge my students. I teach at the Augustine Institute in Denver, and I teach a leadership class, and we start out the semester. I start out the first two sessions of the semester all on how to do street evangelization and conversational evangelization with people. And then I challenge them. They have to have 5 encounters over the course of the semester. This is why I start at the very beginning, is because they have to have 5, going to the shopping mall, going to the grocery store, I don't care where they go, but they have to go up to 5 people over the course of the semester and try and share the faith with them. Okay? It radically transforms the students more than anything that I teach through the rest of the class. Why? Well, number one, because it gets them out of their comfort zone, right? Am I doing this because I want to try to evangelize people? I've got 12 students in my class or 15 students in my class. If all of them evangelize 5 people, I'm starting to get some momentum now, right? Is that the goal? No, it has absolutely nothing to do with that. Because that kind of evangelization is highly, highly ineffective. I used to do beach evangelization when I was in college. We'd take groups of students from Franciscan University and go down to the beaches in Florida. We'd walk up and down the beaches evangelizing people on the beach. I wish I could tell you that I had some, life-altering encounters with people that I'm still in contact with today. They gave their life to Jesus. I actually stood with a group of high school kids from Michigan on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And these 3 high school kids, they actually engaged in a conversation with me. One of them was making fun of me the entire time until one of his friends punched him and said, "Dude, just go away. I want to listen to what this guy has to say." And I was like, wow, I really got this one kid. Like, he's really listening to me. And eventually led him to 20-minute conversation, which eventually led to, you got to make a decision. Do you want to invite Christ into your life or not? He said, what do I do? And I was like, I've never gotten this far in the conversation. I actually don't know what the next step is. This is completely foreign territory to me now. And so I just looked out, and like I'm standing on the beach, and there's a whole ocean, and I was like, well, there's a lot of water right here. Like, what's to prevent you from being baptized right now? And I was joking, of course. And he's like, are you serious? I was like, no, actually, I'm not. I was like, I can't baptize you. But those kinds of moments, right? It's not for the person that you're evangelizing. It's for you. You ever heard St. Peter when he says, always be prepared to give a reason for this hope of yours? I mean, if you never practice, how are you ever going to know if you actually could do it? If you've never started up a random conversation with some person that maybe you don't know, and just try to present the truth of what you believe to them in a compelling way that might engage them in a conversation, you're going to get rejected a lot. I mean, I have a son who plays basketball. I mean, if he doesn't go to the gym several times a week and just shoot baskets, like my goal to him is you got to get 1,000 baskets in over the summer. Like I make him count them. You got to shoot at least 1,000 baskets over the summer months so you can stay in your game when basketball season starts, right? I mean, we look at stuff like sports like that. Why would we not look at our faith like that, right? Could you actually articulate the faith to somebody who came and asked you? In other words, somebody you were in a relationship with, a friend, and they came to a point in their life where they needed something, and they asked you, what is it that you believe? I mean, could you actually say it to them if you've never practiced? Right? This is what I challenge my students to. And so I challenge them to these 5 kind of random encounters over the course of the semester. And it radically changes them. Because they're forced out of this comfort zone. They're forced to practice and to come to a place that, like Peter says, they're ready to give a reason for this hope of theirs. They're ready to explain it to someone, right? Random evangelization. How do we share this faith with people today in our lives? Well, I want to look at all of the stuff that has happened. If we look at the history of this, we've got all these kind of hinging documents, right, that have come forth from the church, that in many ways are really articulating to us a deeper understanding of what it is that we're trying to do. And so this is a very crude example, very, very basic, but what I think, here's how I like to look at it. Evangelization, Redemptoris Missio, like those documents are really speaking to the mission. Redemptoris Missio is talking about the mission of Christ. Have any of you ever read that, Mission of the Redeemer? It's actually a pretty easy read. A lot of John Paul II is, I don't know if you ever find yourself reading John Paul II, you're just like, what did he just say? You have to keep going back and reading over again. He's very philosophical, so sometimes it can be challenging to read. I don't find Mission of the Redeemer to be as much like that. It's a very beautiful articulation of what is the mission of Jesus. So he clearly establishes the mission of Christ, then establishes that mission continues in the church. The church is what carries on the mission of Christ. So every baptized member of the church then is a missionary. And so if you're a missionary, he then talks about all the different roles that the missionaries can play, including lay people. And then he ends the whole document with chapter 8, missionary spirituality. So if we're all missionaries, then we all got to have a missionary spirituality. It's just a beautiful, beautiful document and a fairly easy read, I think. But those documents, Evangelization, is all talking about evangelization. What is evangelization? What's the content of evangelization? How do we do it? Right? That's all speaking to the mission of the church. Catechesi Tradendae, which starts getting into how do we teach the faith, this is the content. This is the message that we're meant to teach. What's the content of catechesis, right? So we have the mission, we have the message. Well, then in 1992, the church gives us the new catechism. Well, what is the catechism? I call it the how to play. It's like the rule book. You know, you ever heard how the catechism kind of breaks down the 4 pillars of the catechism? We have the creed, which is, St. Augustine calls the creed the story of salvation in miniature. You know, it's a whole summary. The creed is a summary of the story of salvation in something that we could memorize. You know, so the stories in the creed, and then in the sacraments, the second pillar of the catechism, we're incorporated into that story. And then the moral life is the script. How do we actually live this out? And finally, Christian prayer is our own contribution to the story, how we start filling in the pages of the story ourselves. But if you look at the catechism, what does it really do? It actually starts giving us the structure of the game. You know, it's like in football, you got to have yard markings, and you got to have out of bound lines, and you got to have end zone lines, and you got to have rules about how many plays and how do you get a first down, and how do you score points, and how do you get a field goal. You know, like the catechism gives us all of that. It kind of speaks to the fabric of life. How do we play this game of life, right? Well, the general directory of catechesis is like the new playbook. After all of this historical development from Vatican II up until now, the general directory now re-articulates all of that into actual plays. How do you play towards adults? How do you play towards young people? How do you play towards the elderly? How do you play towards children? Right? So using a bit of a sports analogy here. So what's happening now? We're in this time, 50th anniversary of the Vatican II Council. We've got a pontifical council for the new evangelization. We've got a year of faith where there's all of this concerted attention on helping bring people to a renewal of faith, particularly to the catechism and to the Eucharist. And then we have the synod of bishops that's going to come forth with a document that's, I think, going to give much greater clarity to us. So what is this? We've got the mission, we've got the message, we've got the framework of the game, we've got the playbook. You know what I call this stuff? This is audibles. You know, we've had a great quarterback bless us in the Denver area, Peyton Manning. And we went fairly far last year and then had a very, very disappointing ending. All came down to one pass. But one of the great things, like watching Peyton Manning play football, you know, whether he's playing for Denver or playing for some other team, like he's just an amazing quarterback, isn't he? One of the most amazing things about Peyton Manning is this. He's a master, with all of the experience that he's had, he's a master at reading the field. He calls a play in the huddle, but when he gets to the line and he sees what the defense is bringing at him, he changes the play almost every single down. Because what's coming up against him means that what he just called isn't going to work. So he actually runs on kind of a huddle-less offense. They don't really huddle. He calls the plays when he steps up into the pocket. And he can read the defense and can call a play that he knows will work, right? This is what the church is giving to us right now. All of this clarity around the new evangelization, what it's really speaking to, is it's giving us audibles. It's helping us understand how to read the field in front of us, how to read the defense, and how to switch up the play to something that's going to be more effective, because it's changing our method of approach, right? You see, I think so many of us, we want, I think we just become trained that we want a curriculum. We want a program. We want something that we can, get online and can buy and then can just hand to people and like it's going to get it done. It just doesn't work like that. The new evangelization is not about a program. It's not a book. It's not some curriculum. It's not something that you can just implement in your parish and then you can kind of shake your hands and say, like, wow, I got that done. Okay, what's next? It just doesn't work like that. The new evangelization is a lot like my day yesterday. I don't know what that was all about. I kept thinking, throughout the day, I kept having times where I'd have to go pray. Because I really thought at certain points I was just losing my sanity. Like, how many things could actually go wrong in one day, right? But I realized there were three key things that I really needed yesterday that got me through. One was I just needed the right interior disposition, right? Like, I needed to be in a place just inside myself where I was okay with misfortune. I was okay with things not working out. And that I wasn't going to let anything rob me of my peace. Like, that was kind of the interior disposition was like, and my first hour, I was not there. I waited in line in 2 different places, got to a counter, and I was finding myself getting really, really frustrated. And it just took watching another person throw a stack of papers on the counter, and they went behind the counter all into this employee. And they're shouting expletives and just completely losing it. And it was in that moment I was like, okay, I don't want to be like that. And so I had a couple moments where I had to kind of separate myself and pray, say, Lord, I want to be joyful. I want to be peaceful. And in the midst of this, like, that's where I want to be, even if I end up not able to make it. Like, I'm just going to be okay with whatever, and just keep me in that place, right? So I had to have the right interior disposition. But secondly, I had to persevere. And I would say even beyond perseverance, I had to have tenacity. Okay? Like, there was nobody that was as concerned about my situation as I was. And I don't understand it. I'm on the phone with Delta Airlines. I'm talking to a live person at Delta Airlines right, a foot away from me, and they didn't seem to care. Like, there's several hundred people in Winona waiting for me. And I'm supposed to be giving a talk this afternoon, and I'm not going to make it, and I've got another tomorrow, and I really don't want to miss that. Yeah, there's no seats. There's no urgency, no sense of this is really, really important, right? So I had to leave the gate area, go back up to the terminal side of the airport, and start going from counter to counter to counter. I went to 8 different airlines and waited in line. Now, I'm not trying to brag on myself. I know you're all nice people, but I wasn't really fighting just for you. Like, at a certain point, it just became like, I'm getting a flight. I'm going to get there. But do you see what I mean? Like, it took tenacity. Every single place that I went was like, there's no seats. There are no flights. There were thousands of people that got bumped off of flights yesterday, and like, there's nothing left. I'm going to find a seat, right? I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. This is what this is going to be like for us. If you want to sell something to someone who's already bought it, already tried it, and felt like it failed them miserably. We're living in a time right now where many, many people look at the church as a complete failure, a flop, a scandal. I tried the church, and my priest molested my child. That's what we're dealing with right now. How do we get traction with the church in the lives of people today if we're not tenacious? We've got to be absolutely convinced that not only is this real, that this is true, but this is what's going to bring people to full life. That this is what it's going to bring people to a full experience of joy. You can't live any other way and really be happy without Christ. I mean, if I would fight to get a plane ticket like that, right? I mean, wouldn't this be so much more important? So proper disposition, tenacity, like perseverance and tenacity. But then finally, I think in those moments, what happened to me yesterday, and I kept looking for something big, and it never happened. I kept thinking like, okay, this has got to be like a divine appointment. I'm going to end up on a plane sitting next to someone who just needed. And I tried to engage in conversations, both people that I sat next to on both my flights yesterday, and I mean, I couldn't get them to even say anything. I couldn't even get a conversation started. And I'm looking for something big. Like God must have orchestrated this whole thing because I'm going to end up, sharing the faith with someone. They're going to give their life to Christ, and I'm going to have a story that I can tell in my talk. And it just never happened. But when I look back on yesterday at the number of people that I calmed down, that I just smiled to, that I just told a joke to, that I just tried to help ease our circumstance. I don't know if any of those things made any big difference in anyone's day. But I do know, I feel pretty confident that actually the aura around me, because my disposition was fruitful for people. I mean, I was a calming effect in numerous situations throughout the day. This is what the new event, it's not a program. It's not a curriculum. It's you. You are the new evangelization. I'm the new evangelization. This is about people living Christ, being Christ in their world, having the right disposition that's rooted in Christ, being tenacious and fighting for truth, and looking for every opportunity to allow that to spread to the people around them. This is what the new evangelization is all about. And how do we do it? It's not a big project. It's not an assembly line. I wish it were that easy, that we could put together these little factories in the churches, You could plug people in and they'd come out the other side, true disciples. But it's just, it's not going to work that way, So I want to share a couple of other things here, and then we'll take a break for you. But so I talked a little bit about what is the new evangelization, but I think we have to look also at what is a disciple. Because at the heart of the new evangelization is about getting traction, securing authentic believers. Right? So we have to understand what is a true disciple. I'm a big fan of St. Augustine. I teach at the Augustine Institute. But one of the things that he says is believers strengthen themselves by believing. That we find true disciples are those who really live their faith. Only through believing does faith grow and become stronger. There is no other possibility for possessing certitude with regard to one's life apart from self-abandonment in a continuous crescendo into the hands of a love that seems to grow constantly because it has its origin in God. I mean, again, you see my day yesterday. I mean, my day yesterday, in some weird way, was this continuous self-abandonment. And at a certain point, like it was so surreal. It's like, okay, I would get rebooked on a flight, and it seems like everything was worked out. And then I would go to that airline, and they didn't even know my name. So I'd have to go back, and well, there's no seats now on that flight, so they put me on another one. It happened over and over and over again. It was just, and numerous times where I had to I would get so frustrated, I could feel myself. I thought it was going to explode at certain points. And I'd have to go over and sit in a chair off to the side and say, take a breath. Lord, help me. Bring me back to that place of peace. I don't want to lose my joy. So I'm constantly inviting Jesus back into my circumstances, right? I mean, this is what it means to be a disciple. What it means to be a disciple is to be, yes, a follower of Christ, but I think more importantly, to be Christ. Paul tells us in Colossians, in chapter 1, verses 26, 27, he says, the whole mystery of the faith is Christ in you, the hope of glory. I mean, this is what it means to be a follower of Christ. It means to not only be his follower, you know, like in Jewish custom, they would say, be covered in the dust of your rabbi. Right? Like you follow so close behind them and they're walking and they're kicking up dust everywhere they go, you know, that you get covered in the dust of your rabbi because you're following so close. Being a disciple, an authentic disciple, means getting covered in the dust of Christ so much that you actually start to become him. The General Directory for Catechesis says we begin to act like him, think like him, respond like him. That we take on his personality and his characteristics because we're following so close. This is what it means to be a disciple. And I think it comes down to those things like I was talking about yesterday, that interior disposition, but also looking for opportunities, right? There's a unique blend of that. I'm drawing from Porta Fide. Some of these quotes are from the document Porta Fide, so if you're scrambling to write those down, all of these come from Porta Fide. Through faith, this new life shapes the whole of human existence according to the radical new reality of the resurrection. To the extent that he freely cooperates, man's thoughts and affections, mentality and conduct are slowly purified and transformed on a journey that is never completely finished in this life. So there is this interior reality. Faith working through love becomes a new criterion of understanding and action that changes the whole of man's life. So this interior disposition, this interior renewal and transformation actually begins to affect everything that happens outside of me, right? Which becomes my mission. It's the love of Christ that fills our hearts and impels us to evangelize. There's a need for stronger ecclesial commitment to new evangelization in order to rediscover the joy of believing and the enthusiasm for communicating the faith. So in other words, that interior experience, that interior transformation, and the love that I experience from that motivates me to want to share and communicate that with others. In rediscovering his love day by day, the missionary commitment of believers attains force and vigor that can never fade away. Faith grows when it is lived as an experience of love received and communicated as an experience of grace and joy. There are far too many people working for the church today that have lost this. They're working really, really hard to share with other people what the church has, but they've lost somewhere along the line the joy and the love of the experience for themselves. How do I know? You just got to go visit a church. Just walk in and visit the parish secretary, the front desk receptionist. What do you want? We're thinking about registering and coming here. Well, it's a long application. It's probably going to take you a week. You better take it home. I'm not joking. Like, I've had experiences like this in parishes. I need to baptize my child. We don't have any openings for 2 years. And you're going to have to go to a really, really long class. Probably take you 2 years. You'll get done just in time for baptism. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit. Do you know what I'm saying? I sat in a parish staff meeting a number of years ago. This is right when the whole coming home, Catholics coming home thing was just beginning to grow. And I was proposing it. I'd got all this information I ordered from them. I had a video I was going to show at the staff meeting. I was trying to get us to do the Easter Christmas campaign to try and invite people to come back to Mass. I'm the youth minister. This wasn't even in my department. But I was pitching it as an idea for us to all jump on the bandwagon together as a whole staff. I made it about 45 seconds. I'm passing stuff around at the table. I have my video queued up. I haven't even started the video. And the adult faith formation coordinator, is looking at this. She was like, "What is this? We're not doing this." And I looked around the room and was like, "What?" I was like, "You haven't even heard it yet." And I go, "Let me give the hope." And she was like, we don't even need to hear the presentation. Are you nuts? You can't even find a place to park here on Christmas and Easter. I had to walk like a half mile just to get into the church last year. You want to have that problem every Sunday? I'm looking around the room for support, and everyone just kind of puts their heads down, including the pastor. And I was like, "Well, I'd like to have that problem every Sunday." And she's like, forget this. We're not doing it. What's next? And the pastor just let her derail the whole thing. I never even got to make the presentation. Right? Wouldn't it be amazing if we had that problem every Sunday? No place to park because so many people were coming to church. You know why more people aren't coming to church? Because we have a lot of people working for the church like that adult faith formation coordinator. Her convenience, her parking convenience is more important to her than getting the message of the gospel into people's lives and getting people experiencing the sacramental life of the church. It's horrible, scandalous. But that's where the church is at. I'm positive that there's nobody in this room that even remotely resembles that. But you understand the challenge. The challenge for us. How are we going to engage people that have tried something and it didn't work? Or they think that it didn't work? If we're not welcoming and hospitable, you know what? I think we've got to be like Pope Francis is saying. I don't think even sitting behind the receptionist desk and waiting, being more welcoming when they come in is the answer. We got to go to them. We've got to find ways to bring the church out to them. Because if they've tried it and it didn't work, they think it didn't work, they're not going to come back on their own without some type of explicit invitation. This becomes the challenge for us. It makes us fruitful because it expands our hearts in hope and enables us to bear life-giving witness. It opens the hearts and minds of those who listen to respond to the Lord's invitation to adhere to his word and become his disciples. I call this whole thought interiority for mission. This is building an interior disposition that roots us in Christ, roots us in the life of Christ, but then allows us to break forth in mission in the world around us, and particularly in the cause of the church today, to build the new evangelization. So I said earlier, kind of breaking this up into 3 parts. 1, I wanted to talk about what is the new evangelization. What's the historical context for this? Where did this all come from? Second, that second part was really talking about what is the new evangelization and what is discipleship? What does it mean to be a disciple? Right? We're going to take a break here. About a 10-minute break? And then we'll come back. The last part, I really want to dig into some practical application. If this is what the task is before us, how do we practically do something with that and get our heads around that? Okay? So let's take a break.
This is a little joke. I brought up an assistant to help me with the joke. This is our last joke of ministry days. Think of it as a marriage joke, okay? I'm a married person. Don't think of it as a gender joke and get upset with me. Think of it as a marriage joke, okay? At St. Mary's Catholic Church, they have a weekly husbands marriage seminar. At the session last week, the priest asked Luigi, who was approaching his 50th wedding anniversary, to take a few minutes and share some insights into how he had managed to stay married to the same woman for all these years. Luigi replied to the assembled husbands.
Well, I tried to treat her nice, spend money on her, but best of all, I took her to Italy for our 25th anniversary.
The priest responded, Luigi, you are an amazing inspiration to all the husbands here. Please tell us what you're planning for your wife for your 50th anniversary. And Luigi proudly replied,
I'm gonna go get her.
Okay, so that was awesome. I wonder where my wife was. So what I'd like to do in this last part, and I want to leave some time for some comments, some questions, is I've been doing quite a bit of research for my doctoral studies on this whole move of discipleship. How do you do discipleship? As a part of that research, one of the things I've been studying is the way the church articulates what I would call this process of conversion. And I think in terms of everything that we've talked about this morning, but I think even that you've talked about yesterday, as you really come down to looking very practically at how do we do something with this, I just think that this is one of the lenses we have to look through to really understand where are people at. Because typically efforts at evangelization, one of the biggest reasons why they miss is because they're actually not meeting people where they are, right? I mean, we can look back just historically at catechesis in our church. And I think that you find a whole generation of people where they were given lots of catechetical content without conversion of heart, right? And so it just kind of rolled off of them. So we have a lot of adults that are very, very poorly formed in the faith. It isn't that they never heard it, but for whatever reason, it really didn't get traction, didn't really stick. But then I think we saw the pendulum swing the other way, where everything was focused on the heart, everything was focused on the person and the desire of the person and engaging them in relationship, that we actually started to throw out all the catechetical content. And I think you'll see I'm going to kind of draw a little bit of a diagram up here for you to show this. But looking at Evangelii Nuntiandi, Catechesi Tradendae, the General Directory for Catechesis, and the Catechism, I'm pulling out from all of those sources what I would articulate as 7 steps in the process of conversion. It starts with these first 3: pre-evangelization, initial proclamation, and then initial conversion. Pre-evangelization, it's actually articulated as a part of the RCIA, the catechumenal model that the church articulates for how we bring somebody into the Catholic faith. Pre-evangelization would be the stage of inquiry. This is the period of time where you're allowing people to kind of explore the faith, ask questions about the faith. There's lots of earmarks of this, and we'll talk about this in a minute in terms of what does this look like in terms of activity, right? But these 3 steps, you would have a person experience community, experience friendship, and then begin to hear some of the basic message of the gospel, that initial proclamation. And that would lead to an experience of conversion of heart, spiritual awakening. Okay? Well, these 3 are followed by the next 4. Initiatory catechesis, adherence to the faith, ongoing formation, and finally, missionary initiative. One of the interesting things in the General Directory for Catechesis is where they spend a bit of time really talking about initiatory catechesis, which is that primary catechesis that happens after somebody's had a conversion experience. They describe initiatory catechesis in two ways. One, they say basic instruction in Christian living. Basic instruction. And then they talk about apprenticeship in the Christian life. That sets a completely different context, doesn't it? Right? It's not just about teaching content, teaching information. Apprenticeship implies modeling. Like when you have somebody as an apprentice and they are apprenticeship, simple 3 steps, right? I do, you watch me. Second step, you do, I watch you, and I criticize and critique and perfect what you're doing. Third step, you do, I go away. Right? That's apprenticeship. It's kind of like driver's ed, right? My son who's learning how to drive right now is going through this whole process of, he took driver's ed classes, but then he has to start doing supervised driving, which unfortunately some of that has to be with me. And it's scary at times, like you're getting into the car. It's one thing to be the driver and have them watching and telling them things and explaining things to them and mentoring him in driving. It's a completely other thing to sit in the passenger seat and let him drive, as he cuts a corner too close and we go up on the curb. No! Okay? Or he starts going too fast and doesn't give himself enough time to slow down before, and so you're coming to a stop sign and you're just scared that you know you're going to hit the car in front of you, right? Like that's apprenticeship though. Like part of apprenticeship is letting the other person drive. And I feel like this is one of the things, after 25 years in youth ministry, we don't do this with kids. We don't let them drive. We teach. Do lots of things to teach them. By and large, I'm not saying across the board. There's obviously places where they really have done a good job of that kind of mentoring. But that's what it's like. It's more apprenticeship than just teaching. So let's look at these now in a couple of contexts. The first 3 are uniquely oriented to what I would call primary evangelization. So you can see that the goal here is that initial conversion of heart, right? So this would be what we could call primary evangelization. And I don't want to get too lost on the terms, but the church, actually the way that this is articulated in the General Director for Catechesis, this entire thing would be called evangelization. The church kind of calls the whole thing. So I'm trying to give some indicators like primary, initial, to make a distinction from the whole process. And I'm referring to the whole process as conversion instead of evangelization because I think it has greater clarity. But in this discussion. But does this make sense? But look at those bottom 4. Those are uniquely oriented to what we would call discipleship. So if you look at the whole thing in one big diagram, we have the 7 steps of the process of conversion. And this is what we're trying to do with people. But we need to meet people where they're at and then help journey with them to the next step. Well, the only way that you're going to do that is by being in relationship with them. You're not going to know where they're at in this overall process without having some context of relationship. Right? So this is one of the fundamental tasks of the new evangelization. And it's one of the reasons why I would make such a strong case for it can't be a class. It can't be a program. It's got to be some type of system that actually is rooting people in relationships where you have the person who's mentoring, leading, has the context of relationships enough that they really can begin to understand where are these people at in their faith journey. Because I've got to meet them where they're at and walk with them. You know, like the disciples on the road to Emmaus is such a great example of that, right? Jesus meets the disciples on the road. Well, if you really think about the context of that image, where are they on the road? Well, they're walking away from Jerusalem. Where's the church? Gathered in the upper room in Jerusalem. So Jesus didn't stay in the church, in the upper room with the other apostles. He left there and went on the road where they were walking in the opposite direction. And he walked with them and he listened to their struggles. He listened to their confusion. He listened to all of their, like he let them say all of the stuff that was going on in their hearts. And only then did he start to try to tell them what was really happening, right? I mean, if you really think about what we're doing in the new evangelization, very practically, this is what the disciples on the road to Emmaus gives us a great image. We have to engage people in relationship. You've got to be in a context of relationship with them. But then you have to engage their hearts. You got to get them at the level of their heart. And then and only then can you start to teach them the truth. And that, I think, presents a whole new method of approach for us. So does this make sense? I want to look a little bit at activity. What does the activity in those various phases look like? Well, if we look at those first three, the time of primary evangelization, just from for lack of a better word, programmatic perspective, that pre-evangelization initial proclamation, the kinds of activity that you could do that foster these, foster meeting people in these places, building relationships, small communities perhaps, the experience of community, drawing people into relationships, sharing meals together. I mean, one of the best ways to build community is eat together, right? And it's one of the reasons why Jesus set up the whole church around Mass, by the way. Okay. Building trust in those relationships, allowing people to come to a greater and greater place of self-disclosure, where they're letting people into their lives, right? Uniquely, in this period of pre-evangelization, one of the things that's really important is apologetics, explaining the faith. And I don't mean apologetics from the perspective of beating somebody in an argument. I mean apologetics from the perspective of understanding people's questions and helping them find answers to things that they don't understand. But that's a critical part of pre-evangelization, and typically is not included, right? But then when you get into initial proclamation and initial conversion, this is where the message of the gospel is being proclaimed, the liberating message of the gospel. It's focused on Christ. I think one of the primary tools that can be used in this, what I would call conversion engines, retreats, conferences, days of renewal. There's something, I mean, it doesn't always have to happen like this, but there's something about bringing a group of people together for an experience, particularly over, extended over at least a day, but sometimes even a couple days, where you gradually dismantle all of the defenses that they've built up, and they can come to a place where they have an authentic encounter with the person of Christ, right? Ben and I were talking on the way here this morning about the Steubenville conference that's coming here in a few weeks to Rochester. Like, that's a great example of a conversion engine. The entire conference is actually designed to meet kids on a Friday night and kind of in a social, almost a social way, bring them into some fun and some music, and through the environment and the course of the weekend, you're bringing them to a place where they're just encountered with the reality of God's presence and the reality of Christ, and given an opportunity to respond to that. Do I want to invite this into my life, right? So that's exactly what it's designed for. It's for this part of the process. You want to help people come to this place where they find themselves in a conversion atmosphere, something that fosters that kind of conversion. Okay? I'm going to jump to this discipleship piece. Now, I would say, at least in the context of youth ministry, and I'm speaking by and large around the whole country, when you look at these, we've actually done a much better job at this in the last 10, 15 years. It's gotten better and better. You've got more kids, and again, I'm talking youth ministry. I'm not sure how this translates to all adult ministry, but we have more kids going to conferences and going to camps and going to retreats than we ever have in the history of Catholic youth ministry, right? But I would make a pretty strong argument that this is not happening very well at all in most places. We've got kids that will go to the conference, a conference experience, or go to a retreat, or go to a camp. They'll have a powerful conversion experience, and then the whole next year, all of the focus of the youth ministry is getting back to the conference the next year. You can't keep repeating a conversion engine. I mean, at a certain point, it just loses traction. Case in point, my son, who's a senior in high school, went to his 4th Steubenville conference last weekend in Denver. I fought with him for 2 months. Don't go again. You've been too many times. You need to go on a mission trip. You need to go do something where you're putting your faith into practice. No, my friends are all going. I want to go. It's like, it's $200. I'll pay for half of it. So, I mean, I finally dropped it. I mean, it was like 5 or 6 conversations where I was trying to talk him out of going. He comes home, so Sunday night, after the garage door incident, we actually are sitting down and talking about the Steubenville conference, and he's basically complaint after complaint after complaint, and critiquing and very critical. And at a certain point, I was like, "Are you glad you went?" He's like, "I don't know." And I was like, "I told you not to go." I could have written the entire conversation we just had for the last 90 minutes. I could have written it for you 2 months ago, because I know that this is exactly what would happen. This is a conversion engine tool, and you're not in conversion. You're down here. So you're jumping into something. I mean, the only way that would have really been a good experience for him was if he went with a couple kids who were freshmen that he was involved with evangelizing. And his whole focus of going to the conference wasn't for him, but was for drawing these kids in and for them having a powerful conversion experience. Then it would have all worked. But he didn't do it. He went to be with his senior buddies, right? And it just, that's why this is a process, and there's steps in the process, okay? But this kind of discipleship, how do we do this? And this is a piece that I'll kind of wrap up with here today, I think it kind of hinges around these 4 areas of formation. A lot of the priests here will be familiar with this. This is how the church articulates seminary and formation. We talk about formation in these 4 areas. I put it in an image like this because it's all one cross. I think when you start talking about areas of formation and separating them into categories like this, you run into the danger of actually disjointing them from each other. You have to see it as an integrated process like this. Because you can't really do intellectual formation without also doing human formation and also doing pastoral formation. Like, they're all integrated with each other. But there is a need, I think, for an emphasis on different types of formation. You could look at a document from the U.S. bishops called Co-Workers in the Vineyard. And it actually describes these 4 areas of formation. And the U.S. bishops have really modeled what lay minister formation should look like after the seminarian model. Why would we not just look at discipleship through the same lens? If you had these 4 areas of formation, and again, an integrated process, but in some ways looking at how would you emphasize intellectual formation? How would you emphasize human formation in the types of things that we're trying to do for people in our parishes, right? Well, I think it could look something like this. Human formation, these are the kinds of things that it's trying to do. It's trying to help people understand themselves. It's trying to help people be in a place of psychological health, mature sexuality, which is a huge, huge issue for us today. genuine care for others. It's getting people to really integrate in relationship. Well, what does that look like in terms of activity? Time spent together, social activities, group discussions, one-on-one conversations, life experiences, affirming people with their gifts, critiquing areas where they could grow, where they could mature. I mean, if you look at that kind of activity, I mean, could you create things on the parish level that actually fostered that kind of interaction for people? And again, I don't think that's something that's going to be able to happen in a class or even in a large group setting. I really think that, well, let me finish, and I'll give you at least my theory of I think one of the only ways to really address some of these things at this kind of level. What does spiritual formation look like? Union with Christ, building and rooting the spiritual life on the Scriptures, the liturgy and the sacraments, helping people come to an awareness of sin, a greater appreciation and relationship with Mary, a deeper love for the church. That actually comes alive in experiences of shared prayer, adoration, faith sharing with each other. It's not so much learning more content, but actually the appropriation of what I've learned and sharing that with other people. Shared service, social justice efforts, lives of the saints, one-on-one time. I'm happy to share this PowerPoint, so I can give it to Todd. And if you want it, you could email him, and he could email it to anyone who wants it. Because I know some of you are frantically trying to write this down. It's like, he went to another slide. I can't keep up. Slow down, man. I'm on hyperdrive. The intellectual formation really comes, the pillars for us, the Scripture and the Catechism, understanding the moral life, growing in Christian virtue. Like that is experienced in discipleship studies or Bible studies, small communities gathering together around those things, men's and women's groups, faith sharing, really learning the lives of the saints, right? And then finally, this area of pastoral formation. Family life, culture, growing in relationship skills, behavior choices. I like to call this whole pastoral formation area the hot topics, right? This is where we kind of rub up against same-sex marriages and all the confusion around homosexuality, around birth control, around life issues. There's so many hot issues that cause, I think, so many people to really distance themselves from faith and from the church, and it really is just a misunderstanding of what the church is really trying to, the wisdom that she's trying to give in those areas for the way that we live. But the activity, again, comes to faith sharing, one-on-one time, counseling, engaging parents, in the way that they're bringing this alive in their families with their own kids, engaging culture, attempts at renewing culture, right? Now, on a very practical level, like when you look at those 4 areas of formation and the kinds of activities that I'm throwing up there, I really have come to this place where I'm just convinced the only way to really do this is in a small group type of model. I don't know how else you can accommodate all of the different perspectives and places where people are and meet them in a very individual way without somehow employing a small group method where people are experiencing tight-knit relationships that can really grow in some depth. But in order to have those kinds of communities, you have to have some adults. Like what we do. We have a youth ministry initiative that we started called Why Disciple. And really our whole approach, I mean, two years ago I was just creating discipleship studies and was selling discipleship studies and videos to people. And I learned pretty quickly, like, okay, this is not the way to do this, because now I'm just a product. I'm just selling a product to people. And I really started to realize, like, if I want to really help people do discipleship ministry, then I have to actually disciple them. or help them get access to good discipleship. And so it really needs, you need to create a whole system or culture of discipleship. So in a parish, and unfortunately that's a long process. It takes time to do that. You have to pull some people together that show some capacity for leadership, and you have to spend a bunch of time just discipling them. And then they can then in turn disciple other people. But here's what we always try to do. Like, that takes too long. That could take 3 years. So instead, we decide to do a class. We're going to do a class this year, and a class in the fall and in the spring, and then nobody actually emerges out of the class with any traction. So next year, we just do another class. 10 years from now, we're going to be doing the exact same thing. Where if we would have just bit the bullet and spent the 3 years to really invest in training a small number of people that have capacity to lead other groups, right? This is discipleship mentality. It's switching gears. It's flip-flopping things around, where I'm going to make a very intentional upfront investment in trying to train some people who can then go and lead other people. And it's a longer route, but in the long run, I think ultimately is far more effective. And the growth of it, hits an exponential thing after several years. Once you have 8, 10, 12 people that can then start leading other groups, then it just starts to expand from there. So those are some initial ideas. I want to leave these last 10 minutes or so just for some questions or some thoughts. On the application side. Yes? Yes. Well, yeah, I think it's a lot of different methods that have to be employed. The focus model is uniquely effective for 2 primary reasons. I'm a big fan of focus. I'm involved. I don't work for them, but I'm close friends with a lot of people that are missionaries and are on staff. But there's 2 fundamental things that make focus succeed: proximity and access. You take a group of missionaries. And first of all, they take the missionaries for 6 weeks and go through a very, very intentional boot camp and training around not just how to do focus ministry on a college campus, but rooting them in the faith, rooting them in prayer life, rooting them in their spiritual life. So there's lots of intentional effort in preparing the people who are going to be on the ground doing the missionary work, right? But then once they get to the college campus, they have 24/7 access. And they're right there in the dorm with the people on the campus that they're trying to reach. Okay? There's no other context for parish ministry that has those 2 things. Take youth ministry, for example. We don't have proximity. The kids live in homes with their parents. They're not at the parish. And so you don't have 24/7 access to them, and you're not around them. And you're lucky as a youth minister if you have 2 to 3 hours a week with a teenager, right? You're not going to impact their life in a really, really significant way in 2 to 3 hours when they're with school teachers and parents who aren't practicing the faith and all kinds of other things, right? So there's unique challenges, I think, to doing this on a parish level. You're exactly right. I'm trying to take what Focus is doing on a college campus and trying to figure out how do you translate that for parish ministry. I think we're uniquely handicapped with formation. So you have lots of adults. Like, you need more adult leaders to do what I'm talking about. Well, you immediately find yourself impoverished with adults who have no formation themselves. So how do you begin? And there are creative tools out there. Ascension Press has a number of the Bible studies, the Bible timeline, and a lot of the Jeff Caven's stuff, and Tim Gray's done some of that stuff. We're creating a video curriculum with Why Disciple that's all around discipleship studies for teens, but not putting the whole burden of the content on the adult leader. We're giving a Chris Stefanik or a Jason Everett to that leader kind of in their back pocket who can articulate the message, and then the adult just has to facilitate the conversation. So I think there's efforts at trying to create some creative tools that deal with the unique poverties. But I think we're right in this place where we just got to plow forward to start doing it and address the poverties as they hit us. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
I didn't really understand the adherence, like what happens there. So I understood what happens during the initiatory catechesis and what happens during the...
Yes, I mean, basically, the initiatory catechesis is that basic instruction or apprenticeship. Adherence is the person really beginning to take that on in their own life. So they begin to adhere to the faith. They begin to more and more look like, act like, respond like Christ themselves. But that requires ongoing formation. So when you look at those bottom 4 steps in that process, there's lots of overlap, right? There's not hard lines between those. Even missionary initiative, like sometimes people will start missionary initiative shortly after initiatory catechesis. So I find those 4 in discipleship can have a blend to them, but that's what adherence speaks to, is I actually begin to live this in my life and adhere to it in the way that I live out my life. Yes.
I just had the experience from Father Coletti at Cathedral invited the Neo-Catechumenal Way ministry to, I belong to St. Mary's, but went over there to experience that. And a lot of what you've said is they are already experiencing. And so maybe we need to learn more about that because the Hispanics are doing that.
Yeah, there's a number of movements, Neo-Catechumenal Way, the Christian Life movement.
Right.
There's a number of movements like that they're doing the same types of things.
Right, and I had never heard about it until it came to Winona. So, but they have been doing community and for 40 years. So, I'm excited about that. So.
Yeah. Yes, way in the back. How fast can Todd run?
I liked very much your emphasis on the local level, but I am also concerned how we face the national and international level. I was very much struck when I saw on television the 115 cardinals who elected the new pope, and there was no woman who had any part in it at all. How do we, on the local level, deal with that situation?
Is that a statement or a question? I'm going to opt to steer away from that because, I mean, it is the reality of the structure of the church right now. The hierarchy of the church is the bishops and the cardinals, and that is the body that elects the new pope.
I think one thing that's giving me kind of churning in my brain as all this is churning is, I do RCIA and baptism prep and marriage prep, and a lot of sacramental moments are moments when people who are disconnected are coming to us. So instead of kind of going out, here they are. They're sitting in my office, and kind of how. I mean, I think the sacraments are treasure of conversion. That's what we have in our tradition that is missing in so many other places. And so how do you kind of integrate sacramental moments of conversion and grace into discipleship?
Well, and I think capturing the momentum of those moments, like you said, people are naturally going to come to the church for those things. And could we use those more effectively as tools for conversion and for evangelization, like you're saying, instead of, and again, I mean, this I think is even the critique of Pope Francis, we sometimes become managers, right? We put together our curriculum for baptism prep, and here's the 2 or 3 sessions that parents got to sit through, to get their kid baptized. And we've lost any sense of this having some type of vigor and dynamism to really bring about conversion in this person's heart. So we're not even attempting to use it like that. We're just get the people through these 2 or 3 sessions and then schedule their baptism. And we start managing the program, right? Instead of really looking at how can we pray with these couples as they're getting ready for baptism? How can we really help them come to a place of greater receptivity to what the church has to offer to them and to their family? How can we really harness and capture the momentum? So I think to your point, I absolutely agree with you. I think our method has to be kind of both and. We've got to be using those pivotal moments in people's lives to bring about greater depth of conversion and greater evangelization. But we've also got to be looking at ways that we can go out and reach people that we're not even connecting with, who aren't coming in the front doors. So it's kind of an inward, we've got that inward reality, but we got to outreach too. This is kind of both and. How are we on time? Are you okay for a couple more? Sure. Fun?
I know nothing about youth ministry, but I was wondering, in terms of, we're talking about focus and proximity and stuff of that nature, is there anything commensurate, similar rather, with high schools? Because you have the proximity there, and I know some evangelical churches have groups that go around having kids meet in high schools and have Bible studies and things. Can you address, what the reality or possibilities are that may be there?
No, I actually think there's a lot of potential in a high school setting for this kind of discipleship approach. We have 3 high schools this next year that are actually going to be piloting with us using some of the Y Disciple materials for that very reason. Now, many of them are wanting to use the curriculum materials as a part of their theology curriculum and just show the videos in their theology classes, and I'm not letting them use it like that. Because I really want them to use it in some type of way to set up some type of small discipleship group setting, either before school or after school or possibly during the lunch period or something. We've got one school out in Illinois that they've actually have modified the whole schedule, and they've added in a discipleship period once a week. And they've broken the whole school up into discipleship groups. And I think it's on Friday. Every Friday, they've actually have created a space in the school schedule for a discipleship period once a week, where all of those kids are meeting in their discipleship groups. And I think they alternate back and forth between, because all of the discipleship groups are put into fraternities and sororities with the guys and the girls. So there's a larger setting. So I think there's a lot of potential for that. It takes a lot of people getting on board with the vision for that, from the principal to anyone working in the campus ministry department, and then the teachers really being supportive of it too. So I think that's the trick, is if you can get everyone on the same page with it, I think there's a lot of possibility. Well, thank you very much. And I do want to comment, sir, your one question, the reason why I'm not trying to answer is because it's just so far off from what I could do a whole nother hour-long talk trying to answer that one question. So I don't know if it'd be fair for me to try and answer it in a quick way. So I'm going to opt to not try. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that you persevered yesterday and you had the interior disposition to make it through. And I mean that sincerely. Thank you, Jim. What a great session and great wisdom for us. And really, as we go back home this afternoon and in the coming days, to reflect back on the wisdom we gained this morning. So I'd encourage you to do that.